put you in the corner of my screen, and we're good to go. All right. Dr. Gunn, can you mute yourself? Are you ready to go?
No, whenever you're ready.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, sir.
Good morning. Please welcome Hope CEO Bill Bynum to the stage.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Can everybody hear me? All right, fantastic. Welcome.
Good morning. Please welcome Hope CEO Bill Bynum to the stage.
Welcome to the Hope Economic Mobility Forum. Really appreciate everyone who is here in the room, and we also have everybody participating live in the chat.
Good morning. Please welcome Hope CEO Bill Bynum to the stage.
history has shown us that unless we are intentional in making sure that places like the Delta are equipped to access these programs, to deploy them, and to manage them, then they will go to other places that are better prepared, that are better connected, that have more resources, and the gap between those places and the Delta will get even larger. So we're here today to make sure that doesn't happen. We're joined by experts from Delta, by Delta leaders who will share their perspectives on opportunities and needs in their communities. And we'll hear from representatives of the Biden-Harris administration who will talk to us about these historic resources and what they can mean for people in places like the Delta, in the Alabama Black Belt, across in low-income, under-resourced communities across the Deep South. And make sure that we seize this moment and that we make this potential a reality. So let's get to work. I want to start by welcoming Chandra Gunn. We all know that the Honorable Benny G. Thompson has served as Congressman of the 2nd District since 1993. It's hard to imagine anyone who has worked harder to improve the lives of people here in the Delta. Unfortunately, he could not be here today, but again, I'm pleased to welcome Chandra Gunn from the Congressman's Mountain Bayou office to extend words of welcome on his behalf.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Like he said, Congressman Thompson was unable to be here today due to his conflicting schedule, which is a very, very busy schedule. And we all know how passionate Congressman Thompson is about the Mississippi Delta and especially his 2nd Congressional District. And so today, as I look out, I see resources. And us being here in the Mississippi Delta, we all know that we suffer from a lack of resources and usage of resources. So today, I know Congressman Thompson would say, all the people that are here, all the resources that are here, let's tap into them. Let's make our communities better for our families, better workplaces, better jobs, all of those things that make up a really, really good community. And I know Congressman Thompson wants things are happening, but he wants more things to happen. Just like we want more things to happen for not just for, our schools, but for our churches, for our entire communities who make up healthy communities. So on behalf of Congressman Benny Thompson, I welcome you to Cleveland, Bolivar County, into the Lyric Hotel. Just like we want more things to happen.
Thank you so much. Folks, if you're in some of the smaller neighborhoods, communities around here, you might not think of Cleveland as rural, but we are in rural America. And I am honored to welcome Dr. Basil Gooden, who is a friend of rural America. He is the nation's Undersecretary for Rural Development. Prior to his confirmation by the Senate in February as Undersecretary, Dr. Gooden served as Director of State Operations for Rural Development. In this role, he led and supported the United States Department of Agriculture's 47 Rural Development State Directors. He previously served as the Virginia Secretary of Agriculture and Forestry and as Virginia's USDA State Director. He holds degrees from Virginia Tech, Syracuse University, and a master's and PhD from my alma mater, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And he's a native of Buckingham County, Virginia, where he and his family still own and operate a cattle farm. And so hopefully the technology will do what it's supposed to do. Bear with us today. We all know how that can be, but hopefully we will join by our U.S. Secretary, Undersecretary for Rural Development. Good morning, Dr. Gooden. County, Virginia, where he and his family still own and operate a cattle farm. So hopefully the technology will do what it's supposed to do. Bear with us today. We all know how that can be, but hopefully we will join by our U.S. Secretary, Undersecretary for Rural Development. Good morning, Dr. Gooden.
Okay, well, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you're able to hear me. And my name is Basil Gooden. I am the Undersecretary for USDA Rural Development. Okay. And I'm delighted to join with you this morning to tell you a little bit about what this administration is doing and has done to continue economic development throughout, not only throughout the country, but certainly in the Deep South and throughout the Delta region. A little bit about me and the agency. And I'll move forward, just making sure you are able to hear me. A little bit about who I am. I am actually a beef cattle farmer from rural Virginia. Actually, my family and I have owned and operated a farm for more than 100 years. My grandparents, and then my parents, and then myself. So I am a proud product of rural America. I understand a lot of the issues that we encounter across rural America, and the issue of access to capital, being able to have funds to be able to either expand your operations or be able to invest in your family or your child's education, or to be able to invest in your community and be able to see things grow in your community. So certainly understand some of the challenges and obstacles that we encounter across rural America. So that is a little bit of the thinking that I bring to this position in USDA rural development. This agency itself has an array of economic development programs, and that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about today, but also talk to you a little bit about the historic investments that the Biden-Harris administration has made in America and in rural America as well. Certainly through the American Rescue Plan Act that has been passed, but also the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, but also the Inflation Reduction Act. And we'll talk a little bit about these historic investments. And I want to make sure that we all understand the magnitude of these investments and how we can avail ourselves to these resources, not only in rural America, but specifically in rural Mississippi as well. First, before I get started, I want to really acknowledge and appreciate the tremendous work of Congressman Benny Thompson and his team there in Mississippi. Congressman Thompson's team has been a tremendous supporter of economic development across Mississippi and certainly in the congressional district. So I want to first recognize and thank Congressman Benny Thompson. Secondly, we certainly want to thank the tremendous work of HOPE, led by Bill Bynum, a good supporter of rural development, USDA. We have several partnerships with HOPE, and Bill Bynum has just been a tremendous leader, a tremendous advocate, a tremendous spokesperson, really addressing the needs of throughout the South, not only in Mississippi, but throughout the South. And so again, I want to thank Bill and his tremendous team for the tremendous work that they're doing, certainly in Mississippi today. But also too want to just take a few minutes to acknowledge and recognize the state director that we have at USDA Rural Development there in Mississippi, Dr. Trina George. Dr. George has actually been a tremendous leader in rural economic development, certainly in Mississippi. Actually formerly worked on the staff of Congressman Benny Thompson as well. I've known Trina for numerous years. Trina and I actually worked together in the in the Obama administration and now in the Biden-Harris administration. So Trina brings a wealth of experience and knowledge to this space in economic development and community development there in Mississippi. So again, just wanted to acknowledge the tremendous work and the tremendous people that are doing some wonderful things in Mississippi. What I briefly wanted to tell you a little bit about is to make sure that we understand again the magnitude of the investments, the resources, the funds that are being made available across the country and in the Deep South through this Biden-Harris administration. And I want to make sure that we are able in a position to take advantage of on the table when it can be used to address the needs disparities or some of these inequities that you may see, and to be able to try to provide resources to the various communities that we are here to support. I'm so delighted that the theme of this year's conference is really trying to work in under-resourced communities. Or some of these, and what I want to tell you a little bit about today is actually two initiatives that we have here at USDA Rural Development that are designed to do exactly that. I'm so delighted bring resources to underserved, under-resourced communities. Trying to work in the first initiative that I want to tell you a little bit about, and I know I'm jumping a little bit ahead because again, that we have here the mission of our agency is to address community.
That's me. That's the me to me. See, this is all off, so that doesn't do anything.
Address the infrastructure. We actually work with municipalities to make sure that there's clean, safe drinking water in a lot of these rural towns, small communities across America. We also support businesses. So we have businesses and business and industry loans that we actually provide. We also provide grants for, again, community enhancements, community facilities, hospitals, rural hospitals. And also a big initiative that we do have relates to broadband, internet in these rural areas as well. And as you know, internet, broadband, high-speed broadband is not just a nice to have or an amenity. It is a necessity in communities across America. And so this agency, USDA Rural Development, we have a significant array of tools to address community and economic development in rural America. So again, wanted to just provide that little backdrop about what we do at USDA Rural Development. Hopping into two initiatives that I want to bring to your attention today. Actually, the first is what's called the Rural Partners Network. And this is an initiative that was actually launched in Mississippi in 2022 by the Biden-Harris administration. The mission of the Rural Partners Network is to actually bring a all of government, a comprehensive approach to underserved communities, communities that may have been under-resourced or overlooked for whatever reason. But the Biden-Harris administration and rural development, we want to focus like a laser on making sure that we get into these communities to actually identify not only the needs that they have identified in these communities, that these communities have identified. We work in partnership and in conjunction with the communities. We don't come into the communities and tell the communities at all what they need. It's a partnership with these communities, and we follow the leads of these communities and say, hey, there may be resources at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local level that can be utilized to address these needs. And when I say it's an all-of-government approach, really it's across, it's multi-agency, it's across the federal government, not just rural development, not just USDA, but we are in other departments. We work in conjunction, we collaborate, and we partner with other departments across the federal government. That includes HUD, that includes HHS, certainly Commerce, EDA, to really provide resources that could be beneficial to a lot of the communities that have actually been under-resourced and underserved in the past. We have liaisons, actually, and Mississippi is what's called a rural partner network state. So we have actually staff on the ground working through USDA rural development, but actually it works again to make connections across the federal government. Why is that important? Because again, there are resources that could be used to leverage the work that we do in USDA rural development, or leverage resources that are already on the ground that the state may provide. And so what we fully understand is one agency, one entity can't address all these questions or all the issues at one time. But it's a far greater impact if we're able to leverage the other resources that may be available either at the state or the local level to address these concerns. And this is what the Rural Partners Network staff does. I mean, they're an outstanding group. They know the communities. They're quite often from the communities. And so they actually provide tremendous wealth of knowledge and expertise to identify these resources. And so really want to acknowledge and call out a couple of people. And actually we have the senior community liaison, Monica Smith. She is actually going to be speaking later today there at your conference. And so please connect with Monica Smith. But there's also a great team of community liaisons, Juliet Thomas, Gwendolyn Woodson, and Michelle Webster. Individuals that understand the needs, not only the needs, but the assets of the communities, the things that actually we can build upon in the communities, but also connecting you to resources that may be beneficial. And again, a lot of economic development relies on having reliable access to capital and funding for initiatives. And so again, this is what this team actually is designed to do. So please connect with these individuals. If not, you certainly can connect with Dr. Trina George, who is the state director there in Mississippi for USDA rural development. But also, wanted to talk very briefly about an initiative that we have here at USDA rural development called CORE. It used to be the Equity Project, where specifically we are engaging in, underserved communities that we've not invested in or been able to provide financing through our programs in the last 5 years. And so we've mapped out communities across the country, and certainly in Mississippi and throughout the Deep South, where for whatever reason we've not invested, and that's making a home ownership loan or a business and industry loan, or invested in a water project, and again looking at areas that may have been for whatever reason lacked the investment that we're providing to other communities. And the goal there is to have the state USDA team to engage in these areas and have a dialogue very similar to the RPN, but have a dialogue to understand what has been the barrier in having these communities or the community organizations or these groups from actually utilizing some of the programs that we do have here at USDA Rural Development. What has been some of the barriers? And so what we want to do is recognize some of these barriers, some of these obstacles, so we can take ownership in reducing these obstacles. So again, we can better serve the communities that we're here to serve across Mississippi and across the country. And so we take this charge very seriously. The Biden-Harris administration has directed not only USDA, but other federal agencies to really focus on building up the economy, certainly from the middle out, and from the bottom up. It's not a top-down approach at all that the Biden-Harris administration has taken. Again, the funding that has come through the Inflation Reduction Act, we have significant amount of funding. We have one program, it's our Rural Energy for America program that actually focuses on renewable energy for agriculture producers or small businesses in rural areas, where actually we provide a 50% grant for the cost of energy reduction system, whether it's a solar panel or a renewable energy that can be used to reduce the cost of your operations if you're a farmer or producer, but also if you're a small business. And again, that's a significant amount of grant funding that is provided through these programs. And so if you do know of producers that could possibly benefit from, a 50% grant to reduce their energy costs, please get connected with either RPN liaison or someone who works at USDA Rural Development. So again, there are a plethora of programs that we have here at USDA Rural Development. I'm happy to provide you some additional information, but there are teams there on the ground there in Mississippi that will be delighted to provide services to you, your communities, to help address the concerns. What I really want just to convey also today is, one, we're here to serve. We're here to be in partnership with Hope. We're here to be in partnership with your community to help bring resources. And I'm here to express the urgency of now, because of the investments that have been made through this administration in trying to get the funding there on the ground. One thing that we do recognize, and actually the Federal Reserve of Atlanta actually published a report actually 2 years ago, looking at the funding that actually came from the federal government that was designed to go to the communities to impact to pull us out of the pandemic, the impact of the pandemic. And so the Federal Reserve looked at that funding that was designed to go to the various communities. And what the Federal Reserve found was that when funding, actually, if that funding went directly to the communities, whether it's the mayors in these communities, or the localities, if the funding actually went directly there, then the impact of that funding was of a greater magnitude than if the funding actually went to the state level. For whatever reason, at the state level, there's sometimes maybe perhaps a disconnect in the actual needs there on the ground. And so what we want to actually focus on is how to get that funding closer to the communities and closer to the municipalities there on the ground where it can make the biggest impact. And that's what we're focusing on through our Rural Partners Network program, through our CORE program, which is called now, it's CORE now, but it was the Equity Project, making sure that those funds get closer to the community. And again, how these funds can be better utilized to make the biggest impact that it possibly can make. So again, I just wanted to, just bring greetings on behalf of the Biden-Harris administration, on behalf of our Secretary Thomas Vilsack here at USDA, but also greetings on behalf of USDA Rural Development, and let you know that you do have partners here at the federal level with people on the ground ready to serve you, to be able to assist and be a collaborator, to be a strong partner in the tremendous work that you continue to do across Mississippi and across the South. So if we could be of service, please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. Again, we are here to partner in the tremendous work that you're doing. So again, thank you so much for this opportunity to provide a few comments this morning. Again, hats off to Bill Bynum, the great team there, great partners. They've been very supportive of the tremendous work that we're doing across the country, but also we're supportive of the magnificent work that they're doing as well. So again, thank you for this opportunity. And I'm happy to provide or take any questions or address any, further address any of the things that we do here at USDA Rural Development. So again, thank you so much for this opportunity, and I look forward to answering any questions that you might have.
I want to really take this opportunity to thank Dr. Gooden for his remarks. I know that, again, as I said before he spoke, technology happens. Birds happen, apparently. You know, but I don't think people in this room are unaccustomed to navigating, you know, obstacles. That we know that this work is not a straight line, but I hope you heard very clearly some things that certainly resonated to me.
Okay, so, okay, great. So no.
Technology happens. We good? All right. So again, it's just several things that stood out to me. I heard, first and foremost, a commitment to making sure these resources reach the communities that need it most. As I said, I had the opportunity to serve on the transition team. I chaired the Housing Community Development Subcommittee during the campaign, and I heard consistently a commitment to inclusion and making sure opportunity reaches everyone in this country. And when we were going through some of the work during the transition, you know, even the cabinet secretaries and people like me who were not going to stay in administration went through training about making sure that we listen to people like you here in this community, like the communities that you serve. And so I think that's something that is a thing that is certainly important to all of us. I also heard a commitment to partner with us, and so we want to take them up on that commitment. And so that's why we're here today. There are folks from USDA Rural Development and the Rural Partners Network that'll be here, and so you can hear more about the programs that he talked about this afternoon. And to the extent you didn't pick up all of his comments, these, I understand it was very clear on YouTube, and these remarks will be on YouTube so you can go back and listen to them later. We're also very fortunate to have experts from the administration here who will go into more details about some of these resources. But first, we want to hear from some of our local experts. But before that, I want to invite to the stage Kiad Burt, who is the director of the Hope Policy Institute, to provide some context into economic mobility conditions here in the Delta and across the Deep South. Kiad?
All right, thanks, Bill. Good morning, everybody. And as Bill mentioned, thank you. Good morning. I love being home in the South. I'm here to provide an economic overview of the Deep South and to give a simple definition of what is economic mobility to really set the stage on why these federal resources and investments are important for Deep South communities who typically come from low resource environments. So, first slide. So let's start with a definition of economic mobility. So economic mobility refers to the capacity or the ability of a family, household, community to improve their economic condition as they move out of low income to high income or to financial stability. In many ways, it's simply a measure to say, can this household community achieve the American dream of financial stability? Now, what you see behind me is a map that's provided by Opportunity Insights that actually shows the economic mobility of children born into low-income households. The red shows communities that make lower incomes, and then blue shows children of low-income households that make higher incomes. And what you will see is that the red is highly concentrated in the Deep South and Southeastern region, whereas the blue is more concentrated in the Midwest and in some cases the Northwest. So in short, you see that economic mobility is lower in our Deep South region, lower in the Southeast as compared to other areas of the country. And if you go to the next slide, if we look at where we are today, which is Bolivar County, you would see much of the same, where children who are born to low-income parents still make lower incomes, okay? And we also know, if you go to the next slide, not to move too quickly, that economic mobility is also tempered by race, where you see on the west side of Cleveland, which is the city of Cleveland, you see that children born to low-income parents have higher salaries, higher incomes than children born to low-income parents on the east side of Cleveland. The right map that you see is race. The children who have higher incomes are predominantly white, and the children who have lower incomes on the east side of Cleveland are predominantly black. And so we understand that economic mobility must also take a geographic lens in as much as it takes a racialized lens to make sure these communities get the funds that they need. All right, next slide. Now, more broadly, when we talk about economic mobility, we must also appreciate that these trends in lower mobility or higher mobility also correlate to persistent poverty. Now, persistent poverty is any county that has a poverty rate of at least 20% for the past 3 years or 3 decades. Well, the map in the middle shows that there are many communities in the Deep South and Southeast that have been in poverty for up to 5 decades. 5 decades. And the inset maps, the 3 maps on each side of the graphic, show that persistent poverty is tightly correlated or is closely associated with other economic indicators, such as poor health outcomes, lower educational attainment, higher unemployment, and higher rates of underbanked and underbanked households. And so the dark green outline shows persistent poverty counties, and the shaded areas are the variables that I just mentioned. And what you can see on each map is a tight correlation of that green and that light gray that shows you that economic mobility also manifests and appears in other economic indicators, which typically are typically important for economic mobility. What's also important to note is that the Deep South, which we define as 5 states of Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Tennessee, is home to 1/3 of the nation's persistent poverty counties. So again, we're starting to see a pattern of the intersection of place, race, and policy that breeds economic mobility necessities, which is why we're talking today about federal investments. All right, next slide. Now, we know that capital access is a driver of economic mobility, particularly for small businesses and small business growth. We also know that the racial wealth gap is positively impacted by small business access to capital. Now, we know that the racial wealth gap now sits at 6 times, so white households have 6 times the amount of wealth than black households, but that number shrinks to 3 times when we look at white and black-owned business owners, where white-owned businesses have 3 times the amount of wealth than black-owned businesses. But we also know that disparities exist in access to small business capital, where you see that over half, 50% of white-owned businesses, 56%, are fully approved for their loans, whereas just under a third of black-owned businesses are fully approved for their loans. Conversely, we see that black and Hispanic-owned businesses have higher denial rates for small business access to capital, which again is particularly important for many of our businesses in the Deep South because the majority, nearly 3/4, 74%, are non-employers, which could be your nail techs, your real estate agents, your barbers, people who are very in need of capital, but again, are more likely to face challenges in accepting and accessing that capital. Now, another major driver of wealth generation and economic mobility is homeownership. Next slide, please. And you see, similar to small business access to capital, that disparities exist. But we have to appreciate that homeownership is inextricably linked to positive outcomes in health, political participation, and financial stability. But for every state in the Deep South, you see that the racial homeownership gap looms large. In fact, the racial homeownership gap is larger today than it was in 1960 when racial discrimination in housing was legal. But we know, again, that homeownership is important for economic mobility and a driver of wealth. But these confluence of factors, so the lack of access to small business capital, the lack of adequate access to homeownership and mortgage financing, unsurprisingly manifests itself in climate readiness and infrastructure quality. Next slide. So here we have a snapshot of Shaw, Mississippi. This is data from the CEQ Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool made available by the Council of Environmental Quality, which measures several indicators of energy and infrastructure, such as health, housing, legacy pollution, transportation, water, and wastewater infrastructure. We see that Shaw has among the highest energy costs in the entire nation. And we also see that they have some of the poorest health outcomes in the entire nation. And so when we think about federal investments, particularly through the Infrastructure and Inflation Reduction Act, we see that it's most necessary for these small communities. And I know Mayor Standing's here today. He'll tell you much more about how they are managing accessing federal dollars and what they've been able to accomplish with strong partners there in the community. But it's just to say, this is to say that this is what we're up against. This is the need, and this is why we need to continue to increase access to federal investments. Next slide, please. So given the barriers to economic mobility and the disparities that exist in accessing financial generators of wealth, it should be no surprise that under-resourced communities, when they have access to federal investment and resources, actually improve their financial outcomes and their conditions. This slide shows liquid asset poverty rates from 2019 and 2021, showing that there's a decrease in liquid asset poverty. Liquid asset poverty is the percentage of households that have the ability to pay their bills for 3 months in the case that they were unemployed or had some type of economic downturn. The light bulb should be going off. COVID-19, the pandemic, what was the liquid asset rate in 2019? You see in each of our Deep South states, it was pretty high, much higher than the national rate. But you'll see that in 2021, there's a significant decrease. Well, what happened between 2019 and 2021? We saw federal investment reaching the households that needed it the most. Stimulus checks, child tax credits, unemployment, the list goes on, even at the state level. And you see that families that needed the most did what they had to do to improve their financial outcomes and conditions. Next slide, please. We also see similar trends among race, where we see that the liquid asset poverty actually was reduced from 2019 to 2021 by up to 19%. But the disparity still exists across racialized race households of color, I say it that way. So more needs to be done, again, along racialized lines to make sure that federal investments are reaching the communities that need it the most. Now, I'm coming to a close like a good Baptist preacher. I won't hold you long. This is a map of Real Capacity Index, which is created by Headwaters Economics, and it looks at metrics related to local government capacity to absorb federal dollars. We're looking at measures of, is there a HBCU or a university in the region? We're looking at staff capacity, expertise. And what this map shows you is the percentage of counties that are able to receive federal dollars versus those that are not. So the lighter the shading, the less the capacity in the area. And you can see that in places like the east and west coast of the United States, you see that they are much better, well-positioned to receive federal dollars than communities and counties in the Deep South. So you see that deeper concentration of the gold color. But when you look at the Delta, the next slide, it's all gold. It's all yellow. You see that we have a greater need for capacity to absorb federal dollars. Particularly, for example, look at Sunflower County. 88% of counties in the nation are better positioned to receive and absorb federal dollars than Sunflower County. So what does this really mean for today's conversation and discussion? It means that we need to figure out in the simplest way how to get our communities in the Deep South, in the Delta, to access federal investment dollars, federal resources. This is the difference between coming out of the pandemic and being more prepared for a more robust and secured and resourced community. So given that these issues that I've discussed today, I look forward to hearing from our panelists, their perspectives on how we can do this and achieve this together in collaboration, because our communities need it the most. So with that, I say thank you and looking forward to the conversation.
Please welcome to the stage the Community Perspectives panel.
Good morning, good morning. Good morning. Let's go with that one. We'll just pass the mic. Good morning. All right. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Ed Sivak. I'm the Chief Policy and Communications Officer at Hope Credit Union, Hope Enterprise Corporation, Hope Policy Institute. We really are excited about having you all here today, both in the room and online from all over the country. And let me just tell y'all, if this panel were a movie, it would be recognized for Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress. We've got an all-star roster up here. So let me tell you a little bit about the folks we have with us today. On my right, we have Mayor Stanton, Mayor Shaw, two-time elected mayor. He got past that first election and got reelected. He's been there since 2017. He is also a 38-year veteran. He was a command sergeant major in the Army as well. So we're excited to have Mayor Stanton with us today from Shaw, Mississippi, where Hope Credit Union actually also has a branch. To the right of Mayor Stanton, I guess my right, your left, we have Gloria Dickerson, Supervisor Dickerson, who is literally walking history herself. Her family was integrally involved with integrating the school system in Drew. She is the second woman ever elected to the Board of Supervisors in Sunflower County. She is a nonprofit leader, ran the Mid-South Delta Initiative with the Kellogg Foundation, and is the CEO and founder of We Together Change. And to Gloria's right, Supervisor Dickerson's right, we have Emily Rausch Elliott, who is the principal architect at Delta Design Build, also award-winning architect, won the Young Architect Award for the AIA, is a Rose Architecture Fellow, citizen architect, has built housing all over the world, in Buenos Aires, and health clinics in Tanzania, worked on the Gulf Coast after Katrina, and is now working up here in the Delta. So, as I shared, y'all, a star-studded cast. So we're going to begin with Mayor Stanton. Mayor, it's fitting that we start this conversation with the mayor of Shaw. Shaw is obviously a community that is recognized all over the country for overcoming, frankly, discrimination in the way federal dollars have flowed, the way municipal services were offered. The Hawkins versus Town of Shaw case is one that communities have used to ensure that federal dollars go where they need to go. Could you just start us off today with just maybe painting a picture of the community of Shaw and the needs and some of the things you've done to address the needs in your community?
Good morning, everyone. Let me first of all thank Mr. Bynum for this opportunity, for asking. And I'm honored, Mr. Bynum, I'm honored to be one of the panelists for today's program. I have a dynamite relationship with hope. I'm a firm believer that where there is no vision, people perish. Shaw is known nationally for that Hawkins versus Shaw equitable case in the United States Supreme Court. You guys, I have used that case personally for a lot of the grants that we've received there at the city of Shaw. Back in the day, Shaw citizens were not provided equal services, water, sewer, street lights, they were not. This family, Mr. Hawkins and his family, filed a lawsuit, made it all the way to the Supreme Court. That case has been used all over the United States of America to get equitable services for all citizens in those different prospective communities. Guys, I take advantage of it. I know the needs of Shaw. Water, sewer, streets, storm drain, just the list goes on and on and on. And Kurt mentioned something about transportation, medical assistance, medical needs, grocery stores. Shaw's in need. Shaw's in need. Right now, we have a Family Dollar store, Dollar Tree, that's new to Shaw. I have a doctor's clinic. We've got several grants out there now that we've been awarded. The MCWI is going to help us greatly improve the quality of services to our citizens there in Shaw. What we're going to do with our MCWI's money is help generate funds also. Most of us small towns are in the same boat. Our dollars come from property taxes, water bills. That's really about it. If you're like Shaw, you don't get much money for sales taxes because of your lack of businesses. You don't get it. So what we're doing with our MCWI money, we're installing water meters, which is needed also. We're replacing a number of water lines, which we need. We are doing insertion valves on the water system where you don't have to turn off the whole system or the entire system just to fix a water leak. We are installing fire hydrants. And granted now, Shaw's system has not been upgraded probably since the inception of Shaw. So there is a dire need for Shaw to do these particular things. What we're focusing on right now is our infrastructure. We've got to get it replaced or updated. I guarantee you I can apply for $10 million to do street repairs. That's out of line. You'd probably be awarded those type dollars. But what are you going to do when you go in and tear your streets up again to replace water lines, to replace sewer lines? It doesn't look good for the federal government. When these dollars first came available, one of my main goals, my main goal was to pursue every dollar I could acquire for the city of Shaw. You guys, I've gotten some money. I'm throwing this out there to you, but DRA, HUD, MCWI, I've gotten that money. Right now, we're in the planning phases with our engineers for the different projects that we've got going. If power go out right now in Shaw, I cannot provide my citizens with water. I don't have emergency generators. I'm getting them. I don't have grocery stores in Shaw, but through Delta Hands for Hope, I do have a place where our people can go and order groceries online and deliver it to that location. They just come there and pick them up. It hurt my feeling real bad during the pandemic. And I knew something had to be done as far as transportation for our people. I had a gentleman told me he charged $40 to take a person to Cleveland and make one stop. Cleveland, 10 miles from Shaw, and to make one stop was charging $40. And as a CEO for Shaw, it really hurt. But we've got the organizations that got an organization in Shaw, just like Hope Credit Union provides the banking. We've got Delta Hands for Hope, Ms. Fountain over here, who works with our senior citizens and citizens, period, to help in all different venues there in Shaw. We've come a long way. We've got a long way to go. And right now, we're actually just waiting for engineers. And let me throw this out to you, too. Shaw has a good working relationship with their engineers. So any mayors all the persons that are here today, make sure you've got a good working relationship with your engineers. Whomever you select for different projects, make sure you have a good working relationship with them, because they're going to be your backbone. They're going to submit all of your paperwork, or you want them to submit all your paperwork. If you're like me, you don't know what a CR 99 point whatever all this is. That's not your area. That's not your line of expertise. So don't puzzle yourself, but trust that the people you hire or you employ will take care of you and do the right thing. You gotta, I just talked to Allison over here this morning. She know why, no, she know that's $400,000, you guys. You've gotta stay in touch, you've gotta communicate. You've gotta let the people that are working along with you know what your vision is. You got to. You cannot assume and then you won't get anything done. You will not. Trust that your people that you employ, you work with, are going to give you your money's worth. I encourage you every time something come across the net about money, throw your name in that. Nobody's going to bring it to you and just put it in your lap. It's not going to happen. Oh, okay. Look, y'all, I can do this all day, okay? And I'm gonna throw this out and then I'm done. As a command sergeant major, you can't hurt my feelings when I apply and you turn me down the first time, because when you open it again, I'm going again.
All right. I promise we'll come back to you, Mayor. All right. Supervisor Dickerson, we're going to move on to you next. And I wonder if you could do the same and just share a little bit about the communities where you live and where you work, with the added twist of the perspective of the county government, but also as a nonprofit leader as well. You've been successful bringing in diverse sets of dollars over the years.
Okay, let me see. Where do I start? Talking about my community. I am in Sunflower County. I am a supervisor in my third term. I also operate a nonprofit in the town of Drew, Mississippi, which is the town where I grew up. I moved back to the town of Drew from Jackson, also from Battle Creek, Michigan. And I came back because I saw the conditions in the community that I didn't like. Not only did I see the conditions that I didn't like, I also saw a vision of what I wanted the community to look like and what I wanted the people in those communities to have. And so we talk a lot about the poverty that are in these communities, and that's true. There's so much poverty there. Actually, in the town of Drew, 48% of the people live below the poverty line. So my dream is, how do we get away from poverty and stop talking about poverty and really get people to prosperity? And so that's what I've been dealing with. And so I'm thankful and I'm grateful for the resources that are out there and for the resources that the communities can get. But I'm also concerned about those resources because I come from a family that has been working in the equity movement or equality movement or civil rights movement for all my life. And I often heard the generation that passed before us talk about the same things that we're talking about now, how resources are out there, but resources do not reach the ground. And they don't get to the ground where the people really can take advantage of those resources. Things come, things go, poverty then, poverty still now, resources not getting there. Now, one of the things that I am thankful for is hope. Hope has been helpful in getting actual resources down to the ground level, where the people live, where the people can take advantage of those things. But let's say we wanted to leave it up to a municipality to try to get resources. And I keep hearing the line, the money's out there, all you have to do is apply. And I'm like, therein lies the problem. Apply. It's not easy to apply for these grants. I can tell you that because I have applied. I applied for foundation grants and I applied for federal grants. There is a difference. One's more difficult than the other one. I'd say the federal grants are a lot more difficult than the other ones. And when I say that, I mean like in these communities where you have the mayors and the aldermen, the capacity there to just put together a grant proposal is not easy. And another thing is, we got plenty of money, and we talk about, well, we'll give you 50% or whatever you need, we'll give it to you. Where's the other 50% coming from? These small communities do not have 50% of money. These small communities do not even have money for operations. They can't pay their staff. They can't afford to get their audits. They can't do all these things, but you tell them, I'll give you 50% if you give me 50. That's almost impossible for a lot of these communities. And we've talked about that for a long time, and we need to advocate that that policy somewhere be changed. And if you're talking about equity, that's okay to give it to communities like Madison, DeSoto. They do have the 50%. But when you start talking about equity, we have to take into consideration that Sunflower County is not Madison County. What you require of them should be different than what you require of Sunflower County. And that's what we mean when we say equity. You have to go above and beyond to make sure these smaller communities can have access to these communities. So that's one of the things that I'm concerned about. And also another thing that needs to happen in these communities, because the people will come together and the people will organize to get things, but once things begin to stall, it's like the hope may be lost. So I think community education is also very important. Educating community about how things work. They don't even know what a proposal is sometimes. You know what I'm saying? And speaking in their language, infrastructure. We can get money for infrastructure. So I'm talking to my group that lives in this community. I'm saying, there's money out there for infrastructure. And they're like, what do you mean? What's included in that? It's okay to use the term infrastructure. There's nothing wrong with that. But how do we break that down to community members so they can get really excited? Does it mean that I'm going to get some recreation? Does it mean I'm going to get some sidewalks? Does it mean that I'm going to get some money to get housing? Does it mean I can take down dilapidated houses out of my community? What does that mean in terms of getting the community excited and getting the community wanting to take the time to apply for these grants? And so I say that is that because you can try a lot of things, but there's still some things that are missing that we need to go back and we don't. I heard a comment today about some counties access this money and some don't. Do we know why? And if we do know why, what are we trying to do about that? What do we need to change? And so these other counties can access that money. There's a reason. They're not just sitting there not wanting it. They may not have the skills to do it. They may not have the writing skills to do it. They may not have the organization skills to do it. They may not have the staff to do it. So that's what we need to think about. Why are they not assessing the money? Because they definitely can use the money, and they can use the money for all kinds of things. And one other thing, we talked about, I own a nonprofit. Well, I don't own it because my board tells me what to do. but I operate a nonprofit. And operating dollars, general operating dollars are very, very important, you know? We have grants. Oh, yeah, you can dig up the water. Dig up the sewer lines and do water, but how is that city going to operate when there's no tax base there? There's no money coming into the city because there's no tax base. When you have 50% of your people living in poverty, there's no money to even pay salaries with. No money to ensure a safe community because there's no money to pay the policemen and that kind of thing. So we want to help these communities in the Delta, but I think we have to look closer at what they really need in the Delta and be able to lift themselves out of poverty and create jobs and get the skills to handle a job. Those are the kind of resources we need in the community. We're so thankful for the resources that we've been talking about. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, I guess is what it's called. We're so thankful for that because those things are needed, but there are also other needs. And sometimes it doesn't take a lot of money just to enable a municipality or a county to hire a grant writer or somebody with those skills that can do it. and come in and not do a workshop. We're gonna do a workshop on how to do a proposal and how to write a grant. So I go to that workshop, but when I get back to my office, I gotta sit down in front of that computer and start writing. We need somebody there with that person to actually write those grants.
Thanks, Supervisor Dickerson. Great points. We're going to move on to Ms. Roush Elliott next. And, we've heard a lot about water and sewer. Mayor Stanton mentioned MCWI, that's the Municipal County Water Infrastructure Grant Program. Supervisor Dickerson talked about same thing, infrastructure, roads, streets, some municipal finance, public finance. One of the things that we've heard Ms. Roush Elliott talk about is housing as infrastructure. So I'm wondering if you could put that lens on it as well.
Thank you. I think when we talk about infrastructure, we usually all accept that we're talking about a baseline. There's no question that sewers are needed. There's no question that education is needed. But in this country, we haven't thought about housing that way traditionally, right? When Mayor Stanton talks about the MCWI funding, that's gonna cover the water lines. That's maybe gonna go up to the meter. But what happens on the other side of that meter where people are living? And so my team likes to talk about housing as infrastructure because it's a baseline also. Because if you don't have somewhere safe and healthy to sleep, to eat dinner, to take a bath, how do we expect people to achieve economic mobility? How do we expect people to perform at work, to be in, to show love to others? We talk about, we're talking about money and infrastructure a lot, but the thing that really drives my team and keeps us inspired after almost 12 years working in Greenwood is that we get to work with, one-on-one with people. When you talked about the funding, getting to the ground, working in housing is so rewarding because I get to go to an individual's house. I know Ms. Doris. I know her stress around her roof. I know how her roof is impacting her walls and how that's impacting her life. So when I was asked to come speak today, and I'm really honored to sit with these people on this stage, one of the things that they said is, what are the challenges to economic mobility? What's limiting people? And health is the first one that I think of. Kiad shared the slides, right? The health of people in our communities is something that they're really struggling with for a number of reasons. But one of the things that we've been able to do and are just dipping our toe in the water and are going to do a lot more of is demonstrate health impacts related to the quality of housing. I think that there's more funding, as we've heard, than ever before. And sometimes we have to think about it we just look a little bit differently. And so for years I'd been saying, well, we need to fix roofs. If it's a leaky roof, we need to fix it. And that seems really obvious, right? Leaks are bad. But what we've learned is that to get federal dollars, what we need to say is that leaking roofs cause mold, and mold causes asthma. And asthma costs money in other ways to the individuals, to the local governments, to the federal government. And so we're drawing different lines and different connections. Another thing that we see as a big challenge to economic mobility are burdens associated with the cost of the home. I'm really excited to hear later about some from the Inflation Reduction Act representative here, because we see that as this amazing avenue to move forward, related hopefully to the Homes and HERA rebates, where we could do energy efficiency upgrades, again, at the ground level, at individual people's houses. And one of the reasons that's so important to us is that we've done some studies over the years where, just speaking really broadly and generalizing, we're seeing that in the majority of homes that we're working on, the low-income individuals in the household are paying an average of between $200 and $300 a month extra in utilities. And that's not for the refrigerator. You gotta have your refrigerator on, you gotta have your lights working. But $200 to $300 a month extra for heat loss in the winter and air conditioning loss in the summer. I always joke that when I was a kid, my dad would, if we ran outside in the summer and left the door open, he would say, we're not air conditioning the whole neighborhood. Well, it turns out he was wrong, right? We are all air conditioning the whole neighborhood, and we're heating the whole neighborhood. But especially our lower wealth residents are paying that cost. So can we reduce health cost burdens? Can we reduce energy cost burdens? And then we think how that really catalyzes a flow in the right direction. More money in your pocket, but also less stress, right? We know that we talk about physical health a lot, but the mental health of a burden of, if you think about people who are worried about their door not latching well, they're worried about pests getting into their home. So I think of those as sort of the top pieces. I'm so glad we're talking about policy. I'm here to be inspired today because I think policy is such a big piece of it also. Kiad mentioned that, we have 5 decades or 5 generations of entrenched poverty in this area often, right? And it's gonna take a long time. It's gonna take a lot of effort to climb out of that. But what we need are catalytic investments that allow that investment to go beyond the initial dollars. And one of the things that we see that is really limiting us right now is an appraisal gap. So when we go to individual households, we say, well, what's needed at this household? And usually we come up with $40,000 to $50,000 in investment we'd like to make. We usually have about $10,000, which is, we have to make some hard decisions with that money. But we're also seeing that the appraised value of those homes are well under that repair cost. So maybe our appraised values are $30,000, maybe they're $20,000. And what we need to do is be able to invest in that existing infrastructure, the existing housing. Otherwise, we're gonna see our housing issues exacerbated, right? Moving in the wrong direction. And if we can make those investments, that's the start, but it's just one piece. The last thing I'll say is to Gloria's point, I think one of the reasons my team's had some success is because we're architects and we're builders. And so what we're working on are buildings, right? It seems really obvious, right? But that's not traditionally how affordable housing grants have been done. We often come in and we meet with people who say, well, I'm gonna write the same grant you're writing. We say, great, that's great. We're really excited. We need more people doing this work. And they say, well, how will I have any idea what home repairs are needed? Or how will I have any idea what those home repairs should cost when I'm writing that grant on the front end? And I don't have a good answer for them, right? We know because we're architects and we're builders, so we can come in and write those grants in a really informed way. And that's allowed us to work closely with Mayor Stanton and Ms. Dickerson for years now, other mayors in this room, and bring that expertise in the built environment. So I think that you couldn't be more spot on that, the city can't be expected to be a grocer and a builder and a bank and do all of those things in-house.
Thank you. Okay, so we've named some challenges. We've named some challenges around tax base, the costs that people are spending on energy in their homes that need to be upgraded, retrofitted, the capacity to apply for federal money, appraisal gaps. But one of the reasons why y'all are up here is because y'all have done some things. You've succeeded. You've brought resources. You've built things. You've not just homes but communities. And so, what I would like to do now is for each of you just to lift up one success story in your community, where you live, where you work, where you were able to bring in federal dollars, where you were able to support the building of some type of infrastructure, whether it was housing, whether it was water, sewer, you name it. So, and we're actually, Ms. Rochelle, we're going to start with you and we're going to come back this way.
Thank you. I'm going to lump a few things into one thing. So, and it's the thing that people usually want to hear about. So that's what I'm going to talk about. It's our home repair grant program, and that's the name of it. We keep it really broad on purpose. So we moved to the Delta about 12 years ago and said, we're going to work on housing. And I was 27, and I was like, we're going to build so many new houses. We're going to do it all tomorrow, right? And we have built very few new houses. And as we've looked closely and we've studied it, one of the things that's come out is not only is housing is infrastructure, but we see housing as an ecosystem. And to have a healthy housing ecosystem, we think about it in 3 parts. There's houses that exist and nobody lives in them. There's houses that exist and people live in them. And there's all the houses we wish we could build. And that's it. Those are the 3 types of housing. So we're trying to work on all fronts, but the place that we have had the most success finding dollars is housing that exists and people live in it. So my office runs, right now we have about 6 different grants going. We're serving LaFleur and Sunflower County, and what we do is we maintain a wait list where people hear about us and they call and they get on the wait list. We have to tell them the bad news is it's a long wait right now because we're looking for more dollars. But when you get on that list, you can, once we get to you, we can get you about $10,000 in repairs. What I think we've really learned from this is that we need to, reach broadly, and that other people weren't going for this funding. And so I think to sort of the way I ended just a second ago is that we didn't understand for a long time why people weren't going for these dollars. And I think it was because there weren't architects and builders working in the community development space so much. There's, of course, a few exceptions, but it's really rare to say, well, I'm a social impact architect, right? And that's how I identify myself. And I think years ago I did a small conference sort of this size, and I made everybody write their profession on their name tag, and it said, I'm a social impact, fill in the blank. And this crowd doesn't need to hear that. You all already do that. You're social impact bankers, and you're social impact leaders, and you're social impact teachers. But as we look around our community, I think there's so many opportunities to ask other people to be, to Mayor Stanton's point, social impact engineers, right? And so my office is a for-profit. We're not a nonprofit. People often think we are. But we're just engineers and builders who really have a passion for this work. And it was by using that expertise and that passion combined that over the last 6 years or so, we've been able to successfully work with partners and get Federal Home Loan Bank affordable housing dollars, Mississippi Home Corps housing dollars, and USDA rural development dollars, and then most recently some HUD Healthy Homes grant dollars. And so it was that sort of combination. None of that would have been possible without the partners that many of whom are in the room today. So we have one of those grants is with Sunflower County. And to Gloria's point earlier, that wouldn't have been possible if they hadn't hired us to write that grant for them. So using that expertise and that passion together is how we're bringing those dollars, and I hope to foster more of that with allied professionals in the future.
Okay, I'm going to speak on Sunflower County. You said one each, Sunflower County and also the nonprofit, We Together Creating Change. In Sunflower County, we work with Congressman Thompson, who's able to bring us some federal dollars into some of our communities. I think it was 4 of them that's in the county for whatever they decided they wanted to do with the money, and most of it was around streets and improvement in the streets and stuff. So that's so I would say work with your congressman or your representatives in Washington. That's a good way to do it. Also, for We Together in terms of the city, we work with Hope, who's worked great with us, good grant writer we work with in order to get a DRA grant for our goods program and to redo the Armory, the National Guard Armory, where the goods program is housed. And the goods program, for those of you who do not know, is the grocery online delivery service where we provide access to food for people who can't afford to go to the grocery store, do not have transportation to get to the grocery store. We got a refrigerated vehicle, and we pick up the food, they order online, and we deliver it to them. So that's wonderful that we did. And then one other grant that we got that I'm also very proud of from federal grant was Mississippi Delta National Heritage, which is very important to me because with that grant, we get to educate our young people about their African American history. We get to talk to them about those things that they need to be proud of. We talk to them about what wonderful people they are, and we try to keep them informed about what has happened in this country in terms of race relations and racial equity. So that's a very important grant to me also, especially in a time now where we beginning to ban books and beginning to try to take books out of the history, out of the schools. We got grants to do that in our communities outside of the school districts. So that's also a very important grant for us.
Y'all clapping for me to be quiet? I'm gonna wrap it up, you guys. This is. I'm very proud that we've basically completed one of our priorities for sure. Our sewer system had been out of compliance for years. Last CDBG, we're 90+% complete. This year, we've already applied for 2024 CDBG opportunity, and we are hoping to have that out of state. Eyesight, all that. We've got those few little knick-knack things that we've got to do, and we're almost positive that we're going to be awarded. So I'm very proud of that. We've got a number of other projects, and hopefully before my tenure's over, we'll have most of them at least halfway completed. Okay? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mayor Stanton. Well, I have gotten the sign that there's about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to turn it over to the audience and see if we could take 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Does anyone have any questions for our panel? Yes, sir. Come, I'm sorry. Please come up here and we'll give you the mic. Hey, sorry about misidentifying. Okay.
Great morning, everyone. My name is Vicki Murphy. I am with Resilience Development Corporation. We are a new entity here in Cleveland, Mississippi, and so I'm glad to be here and to gain resources. Our company is working on a new project where we're trying to do housing and development. We assist with rental, utilities, and house placements. So I'm glad to meet the architect because we're looking for people to partner with. So my question is as far as the needs of the Delta, and one, of course, is housing. That's one of the main things that we're facing. So what do, I guess, the citizens of Bolivar County in the rural area, what are you all looking for far as house placements and development?
Sorry, are you asking what the citizens of Bolivar County are looking for? Well, I can't speak to that. I definitely don't know that. I would just say that that dollars are very limited, so I can't stress again how much to be creative, right? To go after funding. Can you make a few houses for artists and get some art-based funding? Can you make some houses that are based on entrepreneurship and pair it together with that? Can you work with your local, I think you have a Fuller Center or a Habitat for Humanity here in Cleveland. Can it be revived? I think when we first met with Hope many years ago, we said, well, we better be a nonprofit. And I remember somebody in senior leadership saying, there are so many nonprofits. Do you need to sort of create some new administrative work for yourself, or can you do it in partnership? And so every couple of years, we do an internal audit and say, do we need to be a nonprofit? Are we missing out on any dollars? And every time we do it, the answer is no, because we have Hope as our partner, we have Sunflower County, we have the City of Shaw, we have the City of Moorhead, the City of Greenwood, and other nonprofits. So if you can lessen your own administrative burden as you try to do this work, partner deeply, that will help you really expand your reach. But as to citizens of Bolivar County, I think that's a question for Mayor Stanton.
And I don't know about Bolivar County, but probably the same as in Sunflower County and Drew. A lot of the residents need home repairs. They need home repairs, and we can get grants to do that. However, the wait list is so long, it may be 5 years before they can get it done. So the money, supposedly the money is out there, but it's not enough money. Because of, I think you all have several hundred people on your wait list in terms of over 300 people. Where is that money? They said there's all kinds of funding out there. I'm like, so where is it then? Why do we not have enough to do home repairs? Why is there not enough money for the money that's needed in these communities to do housing repairs?
Great. All right. I would love to keep going, but I see my team in the back waving 10, then 5, and I believe we're now at time. So please join me in giving a round of applause for this all-star cast of characters. Before we break, We're going to take a quick 3-minute break, so refresh your coffee, use the restroom. Don't spend too much time catching up with folks, because these chairs will be filled, and you really don't want to miss this next panel, Invested in America. Thank you. All right. Hey.
Great job.
Thank you. No, right back at you.
I'm sorry, I was just.
You are so cool under pressure. I'm so here. I went. Look, you got it, man. Well, listen, is that figured out? Okay. I couldn't get that.
Hey, that's okay. We'll figure it out.
Okay, great.
This is on? Okay. So now this is on, so now I can connect this to Bill. And you'll put my link. I'm ready to mic you up.
Is this one working? It was having a trouble with it.
I wasn't talking very loud, so I just took it. So you've got a louder voice, so I'm gonna.
Okay.
And if it doesn't work,
We'll pivot.
We'll pivot, but we've got. It's working. It's on. I'll test it this one. And then you can put this in focus.
Cool.
We're gonna try it out.
So good stuff. Yeah, but I'll really, I think people like to hear about what are the tools and how can they help tackle some of the things that they've talked about, and what else can they help. So we'll run with it. No, I get it, but I've heard you do it well. Hey, how you doing?
Fine. My name is Cynthia Blocker, and I've been trying to find a way to get funding to help the projects that I'm working on. I do a lot of houses for USDA. And we know since the ruling has changed, the percentage of money that they give to funds.
Yeah, we just got there. Somebody told us to come over here.
Mine's just gonna be on this other side.
I don't see any, man. It's a
Get
damn
fund
room.
credit to complete the houses, and then we hope they'll back.
I'm looking for my colleague Cassandra. I'll introduce you to somebody on my team who can help you with that later. I don't see her right now. She probably.
My wife says she can hear him talking on the phone.
both of you need this? We'll see. All right, Sean, round them up. So Ed, can you hear me? Apparently not. Not on yet? Okay. Can you hear me now? Hello, hello? Hello? Hello, hello, hello? Let's see it. Hello, hello, hello? All right. Testing, 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 testing. This is not. All right. All right, let's get started. No, it's always good to be around friends. I often find that some of the most important conversations happen between breaks, but I really think you'll want to hear from this group. I want to thank the previous panel. As Ed said, it was an all-star group, and have been privileged to work with them over the years. And you know, they have demonstrated what's possible when you have good leadership and a commitment to making sure that everybody has opportunity that unfortunately is often not found in places like the Delta. And you know, but we also know we can't do it by ourselves. As I said earlier, we've got great partners in Washington. I'm really excited to be here this morning with friends. Some I've known a while and some I'm getting to know, but we will get to know them better now and in the future. Now that they're here, we're not going to let them get away. I want to introduce our panel. To my left is Anisha Stephen. She's a senior advisor to the first ever Counselor for Racial Equity at the United States Department of the Treasury. Tanansin Carmona on the end is a senior advisor to the Treasury's Inflation Reduction Act Program Office. And in the middle is Charles Wallace Thomas IV, the senior advisor with the White House Council on Environmental Quality. You know, in addition to their current roles, they bring a wealth of experience in community development, investment banking, communication, municipal policy, philanthropy, and several other areas. But I want to ask them to kick us off, and each of you will pass the mic around just by starting by giving us an overview of your roles and responsibilities, and particularly as it relates to the economic, improving economic conditions in historically under-resourced places. So, start with you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Anisha Stephen. As Bill said, I'm the senior advisor to the Counselor for Racial Equity at Treasury. I also work in Treasury's Office of Tax Policy, where I lead a number of the credit development for the Inflation Reduction Act. I started at Treasury in the middle of the American Rescue Plan and really worked to ensure that communities that had been harmed by the legacies and current manifestations of structural racism were front and center in how we think about supporting communities and supporting households during a time of great economic instability. Because of the work and the choices that the Biden administration made, and certainly at Treasury through things like the child tax credit, the emergency rental assistance program, and others, we were able to ensure that communities reached a level of economic stability that we've never seen in previous sort of recessionary times. So now working through the Inflation Reduction Act, my role is to ensure that, again, communities of color, rural communities, low-income communities, and those that have been harmed by environmental injustice are at the center of everything that we do. So later in the panel, I'll talk a little bit about the specific Inflation Reduction Act resources and taxes and tax policy, which will get a little wonky and nerdy. But again, appreciate the time to talk with you today.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be joining you here. As Bill mentioned, my name is Charles Wallace Thomas IV, and I'm the Senior Advisor for Justice 40 at the Council on Environmental Quality at the White House. And what that means is essentially I'm a part of the team that's responsible for helping to coordinate the federal agencies that have Justice 40 covered programs within their portfolios, programs that are funded by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and others. By a show of hands, how many folks here are familiar with Justice 40? Okay, so we've got a couple, which is good, Sometimes the answer is 0. So that we have a couple is good, but Justice 40, just to paint in broad strokes, is an initiative that was enacted through an executive order 14008, by the Biden-Harris administration, to ensure that 40% of the benefits of certain federal investments accrue to disadvantaged communities. And so we can get into the specifics of what that means and how that's affected through the different federal agency programs. But to speak in broad strokes, from the Inflation Reduction Act alone, there are 78 covered programs across federal agencies, accounting for a little over $100 billion. And then there are also 518 Justice 40 covered programs across all 19 federal agencies funded by various other pieces of legislation. So our job at CEQ is to help make sure that the application of this initiative is covered through things like the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, which was talked about a bit earlier, and to help ensure that the benefits are actually being experienced in communities where the dollars are meant to be invested.
Hello, everybody, and good morning. Such a pleasure to be here with all of you today. My name is Tonantzin Carmona, and I'm part of the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, Implementation Program Office. I recently joined the team, but my role is essentially to work with state and local governments to inform them about the Inflation Reduction Act and specifically talk about some of the tax credits and the new mechanism called direct pay, which we'll get into. But what that means day to day is honestly thinking through, what we've been hearing today in terms of like, well, what does equity mean? What does access actually mean? You have these high level policies. How do we ensure that they actually reach local communities? And so I'm kind of that one extra person now that you can go to say like, oh, if you're a municipality, a county, if you're, Supervisor Dickerson, Mayor Stanton, staff, and you're like, we have a question, I can be that person to say, like, maybe I can be the one who connects the dots for you. Maybe I'm the person who explains how this policy works. We do briefings in person. We do them like this, when our partners invite us to different events. We're like, all right, if we can make it happen, we will actually go so that you can meet and we can connect and we can build that relationship. Because as you were saying, like, well, we have you here today, you're not going to let us go. We also don't want to go. We want to continue to build this relationship and be that person that you can go to. And so it's been a really interesting last few weeks just being able to do this because it is, these federal investments are massive. It is a tremendous opportunity, but they're also really complex. And people are starting from very different starting points. And so at least in terms of what our team is doing, we're really trying to focus on those places that didn't have those extra resources to begin with. And so if I can, provide briefings, I can connect to technical assistance, I can maybe, if it's not even my agency and I know someone in another agency and I can, make that connection, that's also part of my day-to-day responsibilities.
Thank you. I do think we need to get a little all right, we'll make it work. I do think we need to unpack some of these programs. I have the privilege of serving on the Treasury's Advisory Committee for Racial Equity, and my head spins sometimes and about when you talk about these resources, but it's hard to ignore $390 billion in credits that's available to help improve conditions in our communities. So Anisha, just start to unpack that and help us understand what that can mean for communities like those here in the Delta.
Sure, thank you. So,
It's not just me.
okay. So I'm going to first start with why this moment and this suite of legislation is really important, and then I'll talk about the credits. So as Bill mentioned, it's hundreds of billions of dollars that are going to be entering our economy over the next, decade or so. The last time that an administration had this level of federal investment, it was the 1930s. And when you think about the results of those huge investments from the federal government, we created the middle class at that time. But we know that those benefits were not delivered equally to parts of the country, to different communities. So we're rethinking, as we are implementing President Biden's Investing in America agenda, how do we ensure that all of the resources from all of our agencies actually are accessed equally and then also targeted towards the places that need it the most. Secretary Yellen and Deputy Secretary Adeyemo, who I work for, he says this thing all the time, that if we go to where capacity already exists, we will continue to leave out the most vulnerable in our communities. And that has really been the driving message as we think about these sort of very complicated tax credits that I'm about to talk about. We took the approach that if we design them and think about them where the most under-resourced communities will be able to access them, then we will actually have solved the problem for all Americans. So, 75% of the Inflation Reduction Act comes through tax credits. So that's why Treasury is sort of leading the administration's work of the IRA. The IRA is the largest investment in climate change in our nation's history. So when we think about these tax credits, there are about 22 of them that are created by the IRA. They cover a broad range of different activities. So that can include development of solar and wind. It can include domestic manufacturing. It can include home energy efficiency. And there are credits that span from households, so consumer credits, and then also credits for businesses. Tananson will talk a little bit about these different mechanisms, but so for the first time in history, those business credits are actually able to be accessed by entities that don't have tax liability. So if you think about a lot of the work that we've, in community development that we've seen in the past, the low-income housing tax credit, the new market tax credit, we make people jump through crazy hoops to put these crazy structures together, and the IRA, you don't have to do that. Because if you are a local government, a state government, a county government, any type of tax-exempt entity, you can actually directly get the value of some of these tax credits paid to you directly by the IRS. So the part that's really special about the IRA and these tax credits is there's no application. So out of the 20 or so credits, only 2 of them are competitively allocated. Everything else is, in tax world, what we call an entitlement, which means they're actually available uncapped to any community or any household in the country. So you are not competing against other cities or states or people, actually. If the credits are sort of structured, and all of this information is on the IRS website, if you do the activity of the credit, you can claim the credit on a tax return. So this could be things like buying an electric vehicle, an EV, both new or used EVs, or let's say that you are doing affordable housing development and you want to put a solar array on top of the affordable housing or next to affordable housing. Under the Inflation Reduction Act, there's this thing called the investment tax credit. So that's what covers the solar energy property. There are, again, a number of different requirements of the credit, but you can receive up to 30% of the cost of that energy property covered through a tax credit. So even if you're a nonprofit, you can get 30% of the cost paid to you by the IRS once you complete doing the solar installation. there are some additional features that are really interesting about the IRA as well to help ensure that as we are building manufacturing onshore, as we are solarizing our communities, as we're making our buildings more energy efficient, that we are also creating good jobs. So there are some requirements for prevailing wage and apprenticeships. There are some requirements to use domestically made products. And there are requirements, or not requirements, there are bonuses, so extra boosts for being located in what we call energy communities, which are former fossil fuel dependent communities. And then one of the programs that I design and run is called the Low Income Communities Bonus Credit Program. So that's for solar and wind projects that are located in a low income community or on Indian land as part of affordable housing, or that directly benefits a low-income household. For doing activity in one of those categories, you can get an additional 10 or 20% on top of the investment tax credit. So if we go back to my example about affordable housing, so if you are, let's say, a nonprofit affordable housing developer, and you are doing your project, your housing project, or preserving existing affordable housing, and you want to solarize in order to reduce the cost of energy of that building, and you are, part of a HUD program or a USDA program, that's the eligibility, and you apply to the IRS for it, 50% of your cost. So it's the 30, which is the base tax credit, plus an additional 20%, so 50% is covered. And one of the special features that we did of that particular credit, the Low Income Communities Bonus Credit Program, is really, again, built on this idea that parts of the country, specific constituencies, will take longer to get to ready. So we set aside half of that program every year for the next 10 years for tax-exempt entities and for areas of persistent poverty. So as we open that annual application for that additional bonus, and if you are doing projects in areas that have less investment than others, that have high energy burdens, or you are a mission-oriented actor, there will be capacity available for you at any time during the year. Because again, we know that there are many institutions and organizations that are already ready to go, but that wouldn't actually build the economy that we want. And we are really committed to ensuring that many different types of communities and constituencies access these types of credits. I'll do one last thing. Taxes are really, really wonky. I'm just gonna say this, as someone who's worked in tax policy for the majority of their career and banking, these can be very difficult to, we put out these crazy regulations. They're hundreds of pages long, but Tanansin and I, we are here, and Bill has our number. Call us. We're happy to talk to you and walk you through what these credits, what the regulations and requirements mean.
Echoing what Anisha just shared, because yes, one of the first things they tell us when we go to Treasury is we don't give tax advice. We're not allowed to do that, and quite frankly, I'm not a tax policy expert like Anisha, so I don't know if you would want my tax advice, even if I could give it, but our goal is to ensure that you have the right guidance, the right information. And so while this, obviously with a panel, we're trying to give you high level information, we can set up some time to just have a call, get your teams together, whether it's your finance team, the folks who work in infrastructure, answer some questions. What's been fun with some of these conversations is, sometimes they bring up questions related to the American Rescue Plan Act or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. I sometimes can't answer all those questions, but now I'm like, okay, here's a specific concern that you brought up that related to water infrastructure. Let me connect you to the person who can answer your question. And so that's where these briefings get really interesting. One of the other things that I've seen along with these kinds of conversations is sometimes it's the local government, but because it's tax-exempt entities that qualify overall, it's start to think about, who couldn't benefit from a tax credit prior to this bill. In the past, it was usually private sector that could benefit from these tax credits. Now you have a whole host of entities that can benefit, but may not have the information as to how to do that. I mean, that includes churches, that includes school districts, it includes public hospitals and nonprofits wanting to do the solar array on the building. For some folks, the motivation is climate. They really care a lot about climate. If I'm being honest, I honestly didn't know a lot about climate when I was growing up. But as I got older, I started to recognize the connection to say, like, well, why should I care about climate change? Well, at least in my community, I came from a family of farm workers. If it's really hot outside, like, that's dangerous for them from a health perspective, but it also impacts their wages. Climate is also impacting natural disasters. And that, from a very tangible perspective, that can impact your insurance, that can impact costs related to your home. So, there's those broader issues that make me care about this issue, but there's also just the day-to-day stuff. It's really expensive to pay for more AC. It's really expensive if I don't have a building that, is meeting all of the energy, it's not energy efficient, and I'm spending more than I have to. So here we have all of these investments that are enabling us to say, well, what if I put a rooftop solar, or a rooftop solar project for my building? Can that help me save over the long run? Great, let's do that. In the past, it was probably too expensive to do that type of project. But with these tax credits and the fact that you can stack the bonuses and it's not competitive, maybe something that didn't pencil out before all of a sudden can. One of the other interesting and important elements to these tax credits too is that, there's nothing that in the code that precludes you from mixing and blending grants and loans with this. And so while the Treasury is specifically in charge of administering the tax credit piece, we work very closely with the Department of Energy, who may have the grant to help pay for, or the loan to help pay for that project, to provide that upfront financing. And so sometimes we can also, when we have calls with different cities, counties, states, sometimes it's a nonprofit or a community economic development project, or maybe it's a mix of all of these stakeholders coming to this call to get this information. We can, on our end, say, well, we're not just going to have Treasury here. We're going to have the White House folks, like Charles. We're going to have the infrastructure folks to maybe answer some of these questions, and maybe we can reduce some of these, questions and separate conversations and time and resources. So I don't know if there was anything else you wanted to add to that, but I was kind of trying to make it more practical in terms of what could be a next step that, if in case you did have questions, now, what are the things we could be asking for? How could we be connecting on a project? Always happy to be a resource.
No, thank you. I think it's really important to be practical. I think, as Gloria mentioned, it's really sometimes makes your head spin, even those of us who do this work on a full-time basis, to understand what some of these tools are, why they matter, how can we apply them in our community, and then you think about the communities and the people we serve. It's even more of a puzzle, and so I think really breaking it down is critically important. I think we talk a lot about environment, we talk about climate, and you said it's not something you thought about a whole lot. I think many of us are probably been in that same boat. More and more we're understanding, we're experiencing what that climate change is real and the effects it's having on our lives. But it still is important that we connect the dots between that and the resources you're talking about, and how it can make tangible difference in our communities. So, I think we've got our colleague here from the Council on Environmental Quality. I think, Keod's presented some of the data from tools that you all make available. I think it'd be helpful to talk a little about what are some of the tools, what are some of the resources that are available to help translate these programs and make them real and tangible to the communities that we serve.
Thanks. Excuse me. Thanks, Bill. Absolutely, I can speak to that. One of the things I wanted to just reiterate that you began to speak to, Anisha, is the fact that what we're trying to do right now is a deeply historical and massive project. So, excuse me. I think when we talk about what it means for folks to have access to these dollars, when we talk about what it means for communities to be able to invest in infrastructure, we're talking about transitioning truly massive economic, political, social, cultural institutions to be remade in the image of equity and justice. So I don't want to lose sight of that our project is truly massive. And to that end, one of the key components of Justice 40 was that the president directed federal agencies to find ways for their programs to innovate themselves such that they were more responsive to what actual community needs were. So for example, at the Department of Energy, they have instituted something called community benefits plans or community benefits agreements as a part of all of their funding opportunity announcements. And essentially what these require is for applicants to their various funding programs, which again constitute hundreds of billions of dollars of federal funding, they require that they enumerate exactly how they're engaging with communities across the spectrum, so that it's not just coming and speaking at folks, but rather to what degree are you integrating them into the design of your programs. They're talking about how are you creating and partnering with local labor organizations such that good jobs are created. And these community benefits plans are substantive not only in what they're asking for, but in the degree to which they are considered for the actual administering of dollars. So they account for 20% of the total merit score of all funding opportunity applications at the Department of Energy. Other program innovations that federal agencies are working on include reducing the amount of cost share that is required, or eliminating cost share altogether, because it is a substantial burden for communities to then to be considered for money and then to be told, well, we need 50% in order for you to participate. And it reproduces unequitable outcomes that can be avoided. Pardon me. Another thing I wanted to talk about specifically, which I think is incredibly relevant, is a relatively recent announcement through the Environmental Protection Agency. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is a massive program accounting for $27 billion of federal money that's meant to be invested in communities to help further along these infrastructure projects, to help further along projects that are responding to the community needs that have been identified on the panel that was directly preceding ours. And just recently they announced $14 billion that went to the National Clean Investment Fund and $6 billion that went to the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator. And these funds are meant to be made directly useful for communities who need access to clean, or rather to healthy capital to help them capitalize their projects. And then also coming out of the EPA is a program called the Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers. And so what these centers that are distributed across the country are designed to do is to give community organizations, community members, local municipalities, which might be quite small and don't have staff grant writers, technical assistance and capacity to be able to apply for and navigate the kind of labyrinth of federal grants that are sometimes available. In fact, we call them TIC-TACs. The TIC-TAC that's serving Mississippi is administered through the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, which is co-led by Dr. Robert Bullard, one of the forefathers of the environmental justice movement, with whom he shares responsibility, or with many others he shares responsibility for a lot of the political impetus that got us things like the Inflation Reduction Act and Justice 40 as an initiative. And Jackson State University is also a partner in that effort. So I encourage you all to reach out to those organizations to get help to apply for federal dollars. And then there are any number of other programs that we could talk about more specifically. Another at the Department of Energy is the Community Power Accelerator Prize, which is not necessarily a federal grant in that it is a prize which has smaller requirements for organizations to more quickly be able to receive funds. So for example, the New Orleans Parish School District received funds as a part of this program to start putting solar panels on some of its schools and then create educational opportunities for its students to learn how to maintain and care for these systems. And there are any number of other prizes at the Department of Energy that may be worth looking at. And then we have things like the Department of Transportation's Reconnecting Communities and Neighborhoods grant, which is designed to address the historical injustice of the federal highway system that was built in the late 20th century and quite literally cut communities in half and cut them off from resources and connections that are really important. keeping them together. So between these program innovations and the various programs that are made available through the federal agencies, and then also the sub-programs like the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers, we're doing our best to make sure that not only are the dollars made available, but that they are structured in such a way that they will actually benefit communities now and in the long run, and that folks have assistance to be able to access those dollars.
Thank you. As you mentioned, Dr. Bullard, he wrote a book, Robert Bullard wrote a book called Dumping on Dixie. And it did a great job of bringing attention to the fact that you have a disproportionate level of toxicity in low-income communities and communities of color across the Deep South, toxic waste dumps. They're not in affluent communities. They're in low-income communities. And so again, if you think about climate, when you think about the environment and the need to improve outcomes and conditions, these resources can be very helpful for that. But again, if there are, I think it's really also important to just break it down to what these mayors, what these nonprofit leaders can do, what a household can do. We think about solar panels on our homes, EVs. You don't have a lot of charging stations in the Delta. So if I'm, I may prefer my gas guzzler because I know that it's as a gas station. So what are some things that we can do to again break through that and make sure that those investments are in our region, and that again, what are some of the tools or strategies that you're seeing other communities apply that we might take advantage of?
Sure. So I really like that you mentioned like the Tic Tacs. So it's what Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers, Tic Tacs. Because sometimes we'll have like a local government that's like, I don't have the staff or the capacity to even apply for this grant, and I want to. And so that's kind of where you can go to a Tic Tac and say, I need help with doing this project, or even beginning that process of thinking through the project. So like that would be like a very simple way of like starting to connect the dots of all of these different players. And what you end up seeing is some examples where it's like, yes, you have like solar projects for like a lot of rooftop solar projects. We've seen some local governments who are like, we're gonna actually take this and scale it, because oftentimes a lot of local governments, what they have are buildings and they have fleets. And we don't often think about like fleets necessarily, but think of the sheriff's cars, police vehicles, you have school buses. There are ways to transition those in such a way that when you mix and match the grants, the loans, the tax credits, plus you stack all the bonuses, again, it might pencil out that it might end up being cheaper, not just to pay for everything up front, but then over the long run. So we've seen folks use the tax credits for those purposes. The other thing, like I said, is the buildings. A lot of the decisions around how you heat or cool a building has direct impact on costs, on climate, and a community's environment. So we've seen examples of like, say a school is like, oh, we need to upgrade our heating and cooling system. We're gonna go with the regular thing we usually go with. But now when they look at the tax credits and they start to do the math, they're like, oh, actually, there was this state grant that I can mix with this like tax credit, and what you end up seeing is that it ended up being cheaper to install the like upgraded geothermal alternative like heating and cooling system that you didn't know about before, but now it actually might be the better, not only better for the environment, but it actually would have been the lower cost option. So that school now has savings because they did this work to plan that they can put back into the classrooms, put back to pay the teachers, to pay for books for school, So it's now starting to think through, yes, it's like you want to make sure you're looking at the different options for climate, but there's also just the very tangible reality of costs and savings. And so we've seen folks now kind of like get together with different partners to do either direct projects in their state and local government using their buildings and fleets, but we've also started to see folks maybe get their community economic development teams together and say, what if we, not just focus on the direct way that we're having an impact here, but start to think about our larger, broader economic development strategies where maybe it's like we're starting to prop up small business owners to be part of this clean energy transition. What are we doing to connect those dots for them? What if, we want to be the hub, like an energy efficiency hub? It's the future. How are we supporting the community's economic development to be ready for this type of stuff? And so we're starting to see folks start to coordinate in those ways. There's countless examples, I can go on, but part of our conversations too with local governments is also asking them, what do you have capacity for? What are your biggest concerns? What are the things that you're thinking about now? And we can start to say like, well, I saw this city do this, I saw this nonprofit do that, and maybe start to like connect the dots via ideas.
So a couple of things to build on that. When I think about taxes and tax credits and how they've been used in the past, and even thinking through community benefits, I think the thing to remember here is that the way that these tax credits are now structured, and because they can be directly paid, this means that community members, local governments can own and lead the projects themselves. You don't have to rely on private investment solely to come and decide that they're going to come and do a project in your community. You can plan for what you want your community to be. So I think that's a really powerful tool. The other thing I would really encourage, because community development is never easy, I was a community development practitioner for a long time, that it always takes many, many resources coming together, and often coming together at some magical moment in time to make something work. I think, again, because many of these credits and many of the other funding opportunities are uncapped and non-competitive, that, again, working to plan and think through what the future can be is really important. It's going to take an ecosystem. It's going to take hope, and many of the nonprofits in the room, the governments in the room, coming together to say, the tax credits are our major public investment. How do we then, get financing? How do we have other rebates from the Department of Energy? How do we stack and layer and bring together the technical expertise all together to make projects happen, to make sure that consumers are available, are aware of credits that are available to them or rebates that are available to them. So again, because there are a great number of resources now, I think building the ecosystem is also, I think, a really important thing.
I think it's really important to acknowledge that the way that resources flow in Mississippi are different than they flow in Massachusetts. The state government has different priorities, and I think Gloria mentioned disparities in, Madison is one of the wealthier counties, certainly compared to Bolivar and county that we're in now. And one of the objectives of the Justice 40 and the emphasis by the administration is to make sure that these resources reach the communities that need them most, and to leverage private capital as well. I mean, I think hopefully the billions in tax credits, obviously, and programs will be dwarfed by billions in private investment. But when you're in a region where you don't have large corporations, you don't have banks that really, national banks that prioritize community reinvestment, what are some ways that these communities can navigate these dollars to make sure that they have the desired impact here? I think that, again, I also would think it would be helpful to unpack direct pay a bit more, because you said typically you think about tax credits, it's tax-paying entities. Well, this is an incredibly powerful tool, but people have to understand it. So again, if you can touch a little bit on how we can leverage private investments that may and get more money more directly to the ground.
All right, so the direct pay mechanism, we touched a little bit on how obviously the private sector was able to take advantage of a lot of the tax credits. We're starting to see that that is actually having an impact. what direct pay, it's technically called elective pay, but direct pay, as Anisha was saying earlier, is essentially, you would get the same value of that tax credit in the form of a direct payment to your local government or your tax exempt entity. And so in the past, tax exempt entities didn't necessarily have to file. Now they would have to, file and pre-register and go through that process, but they would essentially get that same value in the form of a direct payment that essentially is discretionary at that point for a state and local government. And it's not competitive. It doesn't have like a timeline or deadline. It's largely uncapped. And so what we're starting to see is, you have a series of projects that your local government would maybe put together. And we've talked about, say, like EVs or buildings or whatnot. Those are some examples. The tax credits that would fall under direct pay would essentially be around energy generation and carbon capture, manufacturing, vehicles, and fuels. We'll send over the list and the resources so that you can see what the different types are, but just again, for localities, we've seen more examples of using a lot of like heating and cooling systems for buildings, solar projects, electric vehicles. And so what you end up doing is you put together a project and you'll say like, well, I was already planning on upgrading my fleet. I now pre-register, file the taxes, go through that process. It's pretty straightforward too, which we can also send that information. But now you would get maybe 6% of that qualifying project or qualifying investment back in a direct payment. We're not going to tell you what to do with that direct payment. You get to decide. That's state and local discretion. So we've seen some examples of some places that are like, we're going to take those direct payments and make a revolving loan fund. So every time we want a clean energy project, we're going to go to that existing fund because we were already going to do this, and now we have money coming in every time we do these types of projects. We've seen other places say, well, actually, we're getting these direct payments for something we were already going to do anyway. Why don't we as a community decide what we want to do with this funding? And so, there's opportunity to get creative because, again, there's a lot of state and local discretion as to what to do with that. Now, the point of the bonuses becomes really important because, if you meet certain requirements like the prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements, the domestic content requirements, the energy community requirement, or just a low-income community, you can see that 6% that you would get in a direct payment go to maybe 30%, to maybe 40, to 50, and it starts to stack, and you're like, oh, this is a project I was going to do. It's going to, the way we did the math, it's going to pencil out such that we're going to save money over the long run because we've, increased our energy efficiency and we're getting this direct payment back to this, and we get to decide what to do with this. That's great. And so part of what I like about this, and when I talk to different folks, is seeing folks' eyes light up because they're like, wait, it's not like a competitive grant. It's like, no, you're not competing with anybody. You can, if your project meets the requirements, you will get the benefit of that tax credit. And so I think that's just a little bit of an overview. I don't know if there are other specific examples, but we also, like I said, we're always happy to answer questions. As long as it's not tax advice, we can probably direct you to a resource.
That's actually pretty exciting. I think said some of the light bulbs are going off. We work with several communities, and we all know that there are blighted properties that can be put to constructive use, and having resources to do that could be incredibly exciting. I think we are. Charles, you mentioned the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. $20 billion was announced last week. I'm just thinking about hospitals, school buildings, municipal buildings. You've got Mississippi Valley State down the road, critical institution right here at Delta State. But as I think Emily said, many of those buildings are heating and cooling outdoors. And so can you talk a little bit about how some of these greenhouse gas reduction funds will can hit the ground here in the communities that we serve.
Sure. Excuse me.
And how they might benefit some of these projects.
Absolutely. So part of the goal with the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is to make funding available through avenues that aren't traditional national banks, for example. So to my understanding, a lot of the applicants for the GGRF funding were coalitions of organizations, a lot of them constituted by community financial development institutions, or community development financial institutions, CDFIs. And so the very nature of CDFIs, which is an IRS defined and controlled designation for a financial institution, is to ensure that their investment theses and strategies and the types of products that they offer are directly responsive to the communities that they're in and are often more effective alternatives to the types of financing that might be available through traditional commercial banks. So I think getting engaged, there's a Treasury website actually where there's a list of all 1,300 plus CDFIs in the United States, and certainly not all of them are going to be receiving funds from the GGRF, but several key coalitions of CDFIs were awarded in the last round of announcements. So the Inclusive Network, there's another one whose name is escaping me right now.
So the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is the $20 billion into new financial institutions. So this is going to be a game-changing set of capital investments to support some of the tax credit work and the projects that you all have. So the administration announced a number of coalitions that will start deploying into communities over the next few months and certainly over the next decade and many years to come. The way that the program was structured from the EPA is that a significant portion of all of the funding, and again, this will be distributed as both loans and grants into communities, need to serve disadvantaged communities. So disadvantaged communities can be the Justice 40 definition. It also includes tribal communities, a whole host of different areas where the transition to clean energy is going to be the most at risk. Because we know, again, that tax credits are one layer of what it'll actually take to do some of this work. But it's also, again, private capital, grants, loans, additional things. So I would say out of all of the Inflation Reduction Act resources beyond the tax credits, the GGRF is probably the most significant investment. And again, it's to capitalize new financial institutions, so things like CDFIs, minority depository institutions, but also the green banks across the country as well, so that as you're doing climate work, you can go to any major commercial bank, but you could also go to a bank that may be more likely to serve you at better terms because they are being given these federal dollars to serve disadvantaged communities. So I think it was really exciting to see so many CDFIs and MDIs get access to this, but I think the devil is always in the details, and I think as we are hoping, certainly from my perspective, that we are going to see capital investments and capital terms that are different from what we've seen in the past. Again, we all know that doing good work in communities somehow is the most expensive. It's many grants, many loans, many all of these things coming together. And I hope that as we're thinking about what clean energy looks like, we're also reshaping what community development is. Because again, we for communities that have experienced harm in the past, we are trying to make sure that those resources continue to be fair, both in access, but also in cost.
Thank you, and I will want to make the point that this afternoon we will have resource tables to go deeper into some of these programs and opportunities, learn more about them. One of the resource tables is staffed by Hope and Purpose Ventures Group. Guys, raise your hand back there. They will be talking about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Hope identified several potential projects, and we put our issue support letters, and we're partnering with groups that probably are going to be managing, 15, 16 of the $20 billion that has been was awarded last week, and trying to get some of these resources into our communities. There's another program, Solar for All. Could you say a few words about Solar for All and what that might mean?
So the Solar for All program is $7 billion, I believe, also from the EPA. The announcements for those awards have not happened yet, but that is specifically to support community solar and solar across the country through grants. And also, I believe, some technical assistance as well. So that will, again, as you think about the tax credits and grants that are needed on top of those tax credits, and then the financing, that's sort of the ecosystem that you see. You see the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund providing loans, you see Solar for All providing grants, and then you see the tax credits providing sort of the, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but the free public investment to cover the the costs of doing that work. The other thing I'll say when we think about, again, this ecosystem that we're building, it really is both the opportunity for a variety of different actors, whether you're a consumer, a business, a nonprofit, a government, to own, lead, be the champion of a project, but there are also all of the additional economic benefits and opportunities that exist. So if we are going to solarize every school district in America, or public housing in America, or homes in America, that also means there's opportunities for installers. There's opportunities for small businesses that work in clean energy to scale. One of the things that we announced at Treasury recently was a technical assistance grant from our State Small Business Credit Initiative, SSBCI. So $75 million is up for award right now for TA to Investing in America related fields. So we think of this again as the broader economic transformation. So as you think in the future of not just what your municipal assets can do or assets in your communities can be, but also the economic opportunities that are created by this transformation. So we're really excited about for developers of color, small businesses. We want to make sure that you're all able to participate in the economy of tomorrow and make sure that it's inclusive. Because again, these are once in a generation investments that will dramatically change income, wealth, how our communities experience climate for decades to come. And again, we need to make sure that communities of color, low-income communities, rural communities are all in the next wave of economic transformation.
Amen. I'm going to open it up for questions. Hopefully you've heard some things that piqued your thinking about how these resources can help you in the work that you do. I will say that, again, Hope has we raised our hand, we applied for Solar for All. We hope we'll here in Mississippi, we'll cross our fingers and we'll have good news about that. But for whoever gets those resources, we've got to work hard to make sure that they find our communities, and that's going to take us all understanding these programs, learning about them, continuing to getting the phone numbers of these folks here and taking advantage of their resources. The Undersecretary this morning gave me his phone number. He said, look, if he can be helpful, he wants to be helpful. I think, very clearly the ball's in our court. We've got to take it and run with it, and sometimes things sound too good to be true. Let's make sure that's not the case here. Let's make them true. One of the things that we will do at Hope, in addition to trying to leverage some of these dollars, is just we provide financing for families, help them get out of debt traps. Only almost more than half of our members either didn't have a bank account before they joined the credit union, or they're relying on payday lenders and check cashers that were charging them what should be criminal charges to just take care of basic needs. We finance small businesses. We started as a small business loan fund, and Nisha talked about an ecosystem. We want to make sure that this green infrastructure is being built, that entrepreneurs in the deltas, businesses in the delta, have the resources. You saw the capital gap data that Kia showed earlier. We want to make sure that businesses have the capital they need to grow and to be successful and fuel their economy and support their families. We also have we're working to dramatically increase our mortgage lending. There are 500,000 renters in the Deep South that are paying enough to become homeowners if they had a mortgage. But if you look at mortgage rates and who gets a mortgage and who doesn't, a lot of people are shut out. But we're trying to change that, and so and those homeowners would need to make sure that homes are energy efficient. The businesses, the HBCUs, we provide financing for community facilities. We finance hospitals, education facilities, manufacturers, and all of those can benefit from some of these resources that you heard about. And so we want to couple whatever dollars we can provide with these tools that you talked about to make sure that they're affordable, that the terms are such that they can, that these communities, these businesses, these homes can take advantage of them without it being a burden on them. And so we're really excited about what this can do to help us drive more capital and more opportunity into these communities. And but again, none of us can do it by ourselves. And so that's what we wanted to hopefully emphasize here today. Make sure that we all have more information so that we can put these tools to work in our communities and transform the Delta. Make sure people can realize their potential. I've seen some of the most entrepreneurial people on the planet here. They've done more with less than anybody I can think of. But this gives us the opportunity to take that and move it to where these communities and these people can reach their potential. So let's not waste the opportunity. I won't Mayor Stanton saying, "Bill, you're talking too much." So I will, but I do want to give you all opportunity to ask questions. Are there questions for our experts?
So, is this an example like if a community or municipality wants to invest in electric vehicles, that would be their fleets instead of the gas vehicles? Would that apply then? How would that, what kind of incentive would be for those municipalities to do that, particularly in the Delta where there are charging stations? And are there ways that we can focus on the Delta? I mean, some of my stuff comes from the state. The state appropriate, and the Delta sort of like forgotten for Mississippi, the state of Mississippi. So is there some way the federal can help the Delta in terms of charging stations and incentives for electric vehicles? Maybe we can be the big picture show for electric vehicles in the country, you know?
You can.
The driving the electric vehicles, they have these charging stations and they're, you know, how can we make something like that happen?
So we will follow up and send you all of the tax incentives and tax credits that are available, but there are incentives for both electric vehicles, for commercial vehicles, as well as personal vehicles, and then also for charging stations. And we've actually seen some interesting projects across the country of communities doing exactly that there's this opportunity to put in charging infrastructure, because again, as commercial fleets, so if you are certainly a county, state, local government, any type of government, and you want to purchase EVs for your, like a city fleet of some kind, you can buy that, use the tax credit, and get a certain percentage paid back to you directly from the IRS. So tax exempt entities that don't pay taxes currently, what you do is basically file a form during the tax year that you purchase all of those vehicles. The IRS will sort of calculate how much is owed back to you, and then you'll get a check directly to you. So it doesn't go through any other intermediary. If you do the activity, you get the direct payment.
Oh. Counties can do that.
Counties can do it.
Counties can do it. One other thing I'll add is that the Department of Energy has an office called the Office of State and Community Energy Programs, which is designed to administer grants and other funding opportunities explicitly for this purpose of municipalities and other sub-federal governmental entities who are trying to invest in clean energy infrastructure specifically. So they have a program called the Renew America Schools program, which is separate from the Community Solar Accelerator Prize that is also meant to help schools get access to clean energy infrastructure. So these are grants that you could use on top of the tax credits to fund some of this transition, and I'm happy to put you in touch with those folks as well.
I think I can speak loud enough. Regarding EVs and biofuel and mixed fuel vehicles, does the Treasury have the foresight to remove that phrase country of origin out so that everyone will have access to those credits if they buy a vehicle that will therefore help the environment, whether it's mixed fuel or EV? I think that's one of the, it's a political thing, but it also hurts a lot of Americans who could have taken those credits. So is there anything in the future that they're going to try to remove that clause?
So I don't know if what we'll be able to do in the future, but thank you for the feedback on that. You know, at Treasury, our ability to sort of shape tax credits is limited by what Congress puts in the statute. So we do our best to, with what Congress gives us, to make them the most equitable that they can be. But again, that might be a congressional change and not one of Treasury's ability.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's getting late, but I have heard you on virtually. And tax credits, are we able to take the tax credit, and I hear them all the morning talking about tax credit, and turn it into some type of endowment for these small communities in the South? For instance, I know USDA gives us a 75% fee to certain policy. Where does the tax credit fit in that? We're talking about renewable energy. So we happen to have a pilot project started now where we're trying to actually do scattered sites. And everything I can see now, and all of us can see those large sites. Well, we're trying to deal with 2 acres and do a virtual operation with institutions. I think group, Sunflower, yes ma'am, talking about how we can help. Well, we're talking about, if you move to that free, we're talking about solarizing your buildings with this project and create generation and creating a virtual plant, power plant. That's what's happening with us. And we're going to be able to deal with, trying to deal with it from 2 acres forward.
So a lot of the tax credits available, there's actually very little restriction on size. So you could do a small project, you could do a utility scale project. There are some very specific requirements of the type of property and how much generation that you're doing. But the credits are actually quite flexible. I'm happy to follow up and have a conversation about the specific things that you're trying to do, because again, I think it's probably multiple credits that would apply.
So then the last part of that was the Justice for It initiative. Somebody trade? This trade? Oh, right. I've been trying to get with trade and see how we can deal with the Justice for It.
Sure.
What I see is that they're going to AT&T and C-Spire and all those folks, but no incentive for us.
So I can't speak to the Treasury perspective, but I mean, I agree, Justice 40 is a monumental opportunity, and with things like the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, we're seeing opportunities to go beyond Justice 40, so beyond 40% of the benefits going to disadvantaged communities. We can go further. I think it would probably be important here to reemphasize the importance of ecosystem building and partnering with organizations who can help municipalities or individual projects get access to the funds that they need. So the Technical Assistance Center being administered by, in part, Jackson State University through the EPA would probably be an important site to visit. Also, in my previous role, I was at the Department of Energy's Office of Economic Impact and Diversity, which is now the Office of Energy, Justice, and Equity, and we had an office called the Office of the Minority Business and Workforce Division. And their job was to connect businesses across the country with entities coming out of the Department of Commerce, for example, like the Minority Business Development Administration, to help them make sure that they had access to the technical resources necessary to apply for grants. So I would also recommend checking out your local chapter of the MBDA. That may also be able to help.
Yes, sir. After all of that research, did you come to the conclusion which road should we take? Cooperative in the mix of things as far as creating generational wealth?
So all of those different structures, like how you want to put the things together, we're not going to be able to identify, but we can talk through what's possible. But again, happy to follow up with you, and Bill knows how to get in touch with me, so we'll talk.
Get somebody else in first. Yes.
Yeah, I just have a question about, we're talking a lot about renewable energy for the buildings around here, and I'm sure, as you know, in communities like this, a lot of our buildings are not structurally sound, so like schools where it rains in the classroom when it rains, or floors are falling in. Are there funds available to first, maybe replace the roof or stabilize the building before you move on to solar? Because I would imagine that solar is not even an option yet for a lot of places around here.
So we have heard that, and certainly a lot of the engagement we've done around tax credits, it's been one of the most resounding comments, actually. So again, I think as you think through all of the resources from the federal government, there's certainly the tax credits that help pay for the energy generation or the solar facility or the EVs or whatever it might be, but there are all of these other grants and loan programs from the EPA, the Department of Energy, there's some from HUD. So things like Solar for All, which is one of the EPA big grants, those are the things that can help sort of cover the additional features that might need to occur in order to install energy property on a roof or near a facility. So I think, again, it's looking through the stacking. We did a lot of very intentional work across the agencies to make sure that things don't cancel out each other, that you have the ability to stack as much as you can. And then, again, we're very siloed in the federal government. It's an unfortunate thing, but certainly Treasury, HUD, DOE, EPA, or USDA are probably the core places for IRA grants, loans, tax credits.
This is getting back to renewable energy and clean energy. It's not really embraced in certain areas of the country, and some states even penalize people that engage in these type of investments by then increasing the tax on them when they go to get a license plate. But the most attractive thing to solar is to be able to sell that access to the grid.
Yeah.
But in northern states, their regulators are more positive about having utilities buy that excess energy. But in a lot of the lower states in the country, there's such a limit on it, it makes the investment less attractive. Is there a way that the federal government is going to come up with where not only homes, but schools, small factories that can sell their access directly to the grid?
That is a great question, and one that I think about actually quite a bit. I don't have a great answer for you on that because, again, those are state level decisions. But I do think, part of the interesting, activity of the Inflation Reduction Act, and again, part of a lot of the interesting examples that I see in one of the programs that I run, the Low Income Communities Bonus Credit Program, is yes, the economic benefits of being able to sell back to the grid are really amazing. There are also economic benefits for not having to connect to the grid and having resiliency of your institution. So if you are thinking about your grocery store that needs to stay on during a storm, or your school or your home, there are, having solar and battery also enable that, which is not answering your question actually, but I think it's the flip side to, what is enabled by the IRA.
Thank you. Thank you for your engagement. Obviously, this is resonating with all of us, and there's much more to learn and much more to do, but hopefully it's got us off to a good start. Please join me in thanking our panel. This will bring us to the end of the Economic Mobility Forum part of the day, and so want to thank those guests who are live stream. Glad you were able to join us, and if you want to learn more, contact us at Hope. The information will be made available through our social media and various channels. This will also again be on our YouTube channel if you want to go back and share it with other folks. So we want to do everything we can to make sure everybody has access to this information and access to these experts who want to help us improve conditions in our communities. We're going to shift this afternoon to what we call our Community Leadership Institute. We've been working with communities in the Delta, leaders in the Delta, and want to give us a chance to get more into the weeds on some of these topics. There are resource panels that will be set up. We have experts here, and we will shortly, my colleague Dee Jones will come up and introduce that part of the day. But I do want to wrap up by expressing my deep appreciation to our friends at the White House, at the Treasury Department, and the Biden-Harris administration for working with us to pull this together. Also want to acknowledge my colleagues at Hope. If you're with Hope, please stand up and raise your hand. I want these folks to know who you are. These folks work for you. We are a community-owned financial institution. We are a majority black-owned. We're a majority woman-owned financial institution. But we started here in the Delta, and we have a commitment to these communities. And so let us know how we can be helpful. We'll do everything we can to be helpful. I also want to express my thanks to our colleagues at Lender Global. They help with the logistics to put this together. Thank you all. They've been great partners, and we'll be continuing this. We will have another Economic Mobility Forum and Community Leadership Institute in Selma, Alabama on May 21st. We are in the Black Belt, and then we will have another one in September in West Memphis, Arkansas. We're going to keep pushing to do everything we can to make sure that our communities have the information to take advantage of this historic moment. So let's seize the moment. Thank you all for being here. Where's Dee? Did we lose Dee Jones? Dee, come on up. Dee Jones. We would probably we would certainly be not as strong in the Delta, but for Dee. She has been with us. She's been on our retail team, on our community development team. She's done everything that she could to make sure that Hope is in the Delta. And so Dee and Kevin are going to lead our Community Leadership Institute. So Dee, tell us what's up.
Hello, everyone. As Bill said, I'm Dee.
And I'm Kevin. We'll be in the hotel lounge later this evening.
So stop by and hear us sing. So this afternoon, we will be having our Community Leadership Institute. We have an array of resource providers and technical assistance providers. And as we introduce them to you all, right now, we want them to come and give you a 2 to 3 minute preview of what you can expect during this afternoon session.
So come on up at your leisure. Tyler, you all want to come up first? I want to thank everybody for coming out today. Thanks for taking the time. And as Bill said, thanks to our speakers as well for traveling, whether you took a plane or you just drove down the road. So.
Hi all, I'm Matt Bevins from Purpose Venture Group. We're the third from the bottom. And we really, this panel was fantastic because really what the work we're doing with Hope is into financial products or resources for your communities. So translating the stack that Anisha was mentioning, the grants, the tax credits, and then really applying that to your local context for your communities, for the businesses in your communities, and for the households, the members of Hope Credit Union in your communities. And so there's going to be a lot more to come on Green Hope, which is what we're calling it. But you know, we're a resource for you. We'd love to hear from you later today. We're in the back of the room to start to like kind of get into some of these details because every project's a little different. But we're working on ways to make that make Hope a real resource to connect all of these federal opportunities to the Delta.
So guys, I'm Tyler. And what I want everybody in the room who has been sitting in your chair thinking about how can this help my church? How can this help my house? Everybody is thinking about that special project.